Thanks very much, Simon, and thanks, Anne, for inviting me to come on this panel. That's me, and that's who I am. I have two jobs at OUP. One is in reference, and one is looking at discoverability across our global academic business, from journals at one end to monographs and scholarly editions and other things at the other. The two things actually go together quite well because reference has been digital for a long time and is a sort of common currency in discoverability, the discovery of new content. But I'm not going to talk about reference today. I'm going to stick to the broader strokes of discovery as we see it. This is really a case study. It's a point of view from a particular publisher, and it's going to be quite practical. I mean, for those of you who are at the text mining session this morning, which was really inspiring, and particularly for those of you who understood everything that was said at that session, this is going to remain fairly sort of feet on the ground. It's going to look at why we decided to put a special focus on discoverability two or 3 years ago now, how we thought about it at the time, which interestingly does overlap very strongly with the kinds of classifications, if you like, that Harry and Simon have both been talking about today. And then to look at some of the stand back analysis we did, which is simply to look at why we're doing this in the first place, why it matters, what the path is we want people to follow, or to be able to follow if they choose, and how we then try to respond to that in the way we organize our data. The other important thing to say about the case study is that this is from the point of view of one particular press, and OUP is a sizable publisher, certainly by university press standards, very big, but actually it's not a very big publisher by the side of the Elsevier's and the Pearsons and so on. So this is a publisher of a certain kind, and the profile of OUP's publishing is extremely broad, and that really was one of the main things we've been trying to address over the last few years. At one end we have the great sort of organized, A&I'd, cross-refed monoculture of the science journal article, but we also have a very big stake in the humanities and social sciences, both in journals and in monographs, particularly in monographs. We have research reviews, bibliographies, we have scholarly reference, general reference and dictionaries. We have a lot of general publishing. Now, in a way, if you look across that spectrum, these things are not moving at the same speed. They're not even moving online consistently at the moment. And so we're looking across quite a wide landscape here, and that, I think, was one of the challenges. I think if you stay within the world of science journal publishing, for example, there's a fairly well-organized system, but that doesn't cater for the people who want to travel across a much wider range of literature than is found in the science journal literature. So, if I can make this work. So why discoverability matters? Why does it matter to not only publishers and librarians, but to authors who want, beyond tenure, mostly I think, to be read? And why it matters to all of us involved in learned publishing? Stating the blindingly obvious, and as I said, I have not assumed a lot of knowledge in the room, so as I say, some of you are going to find some of this pretty obvious, but it's worth recapping anyway, just to sort of get the broad picture. Traffic and use, they're not the same thing, as Simon said, but they are the lifeblood of our business of digital scholarship. The use of subscriptions, particularly from a publisher's point of view, for those of you in the audience, obviously shows the value of the content and sustains the subscription business. But discovery of content that people don't have full text access to is otherwise in marketing called demand. The pace of change in customer and user behavior is increasing, if anything. It's an obvious truism to say that if you can't find it, you won't use it. But there's very good evidence on all sides now about how people are searching for a topic or a specific item and not for a book in the traditional library sense, even in the humanities. Our traffic on Oxford journals, large amount of traffic, hundreds of millions of visits a year. 80% of it is going direct to a journal article. 50% of that is going from Google to a journal article. So yes, we belong in the category of people who say we get a lot of traffic from Google, but that doesn't mean that we stop there, because a lot of other ways of finding stuff are constantly coming through. There are a lot of search systems. People are searching at the web level, they're searching at the discipline level, a discipline research hub, whether it's a massive one like PubMed or a really well-focused niche one like Reports in Economics, Social Science Research Network. and so on. They're searching through libraries, they're searching through vendor-based systems. But obviously we're also now working with tracks of interest, tracks of influence coming through social and semantic web development. And there's an immense competition, but in the end everything relies on data. When we tried to stand back and look at how we were doing 2.5, 3 years ago now, we thought, well, okay, there's quite a lot of good stuff going on. We have a lot of free content outside the paywall for some of our products. Journals have always worked like this. ANI systems going way back before digital in the print world. We modeled our Oxford Scholarship Online service back in 2003 on journal articles. So we created chapter-level abstracts for every chapter in all the monographs that we published in Oxford Scholarship Online back in 2002-03. I thought that was a laugh from the hall, but I think it was going by the door. There were people who laughed at the time. It worked. Half their traffic comes from Google. But it's not at all consistent. It hasn't been consistent across all our content by any means, and that was hurting us in some areas and made it very difficult for us to join things up. We've expanded and improved our MARC program. Yes, we've done that. Nice sort of technical stuff feeds well into ILSs, doesn't do a lot outside that. We've worked quite hard in certain specific areas on our linking, or we had done, but again, it was very localized, very sort of bilateral between this product and that product, between this service and that service, or internal to particular services. We weren't getting any scale out of it, we weren't getting any shared value, we weren't getting any semantic structure into the content that we were publishing. We've, like lots of people, put mobile at the center of our thinking. We're trying to develop in future with SEO built into absolutely everything we do. Those are all good things. They didn't affect the websites we built 6, 8, 10 years previously in separate little silos. And we had to engage with new library discovery services, like Harry's. Not only Harry's, there are others out there, and I don't have to be as vendor neutral as Harry might have to be, but Primo Central and Summon, obviously, alongside EBSCO EDS, are major players, and they were queuing at our doors saying, we need to have this data and we need it now. And our librarians were telling us exactly the same thing. So there was a lot of demand that we couldn't immediately satisfy. Consistently across all our content in journals. We could do it with some of our monographs, but not everything. So standing right back, we said, okay, what are the key areas in which we want to be operating? Where are users going to be? Where do we need to be in order to be where they are, in that common phrase? So we started to try to think about where discovery happens, and this is where it's remarkably similar to some of the things that we've talked about today already. Open web search, obviously, and these are in rough order of importance, I would say. The library services that we've talked about, the ILSs, the discovery services, and so on, increasingly important part of the system with the discovery services. The research hubs that I've also mentioned, really important parts of the infrastructure. But we mustn't forget content linking either, and the really important role that things like Crossref play in that. Actually, an awful lot of discovery of work goes on simply through the reference list, through the footnotes, and especially in the humanities, I would say. There are a lot of other areas, these opt-in services, our journal alerts, the bookmarking, social bookmarking and so on. We can create a lot of viral awareness of certain kinds of story coming out of research, and we have our own websites. All those things are great, and someone can come across a list or a link to our content in any one of those places. And when they do, what's the ideal journey? We'll rapidly run through this because it's important to know why we're concentrating on discoverability. We want them to authenticate and see the full text whenever they can and as immediately as they can. If we get our linking right, and we put the right content links in place, then a lot more reading of more full text will follow, whether it's ours or someone else's. The favor will be returned in the future. From that, the main benefit we get is recorded use. So for us as a business, this is not primarily being judged in terms of money in the first instance. This is about recorded use. But whenever they don't land on the full text, we want them to be able to find a piece of free content or an abstract. Again, easy in the journal world, not so easy in the reference world. And that's something we really have had to focus on. Far too often our users were following a link and getting to what we call the talk to the hand page, which said, log in or go away. While they're there, we can show them lots more free content, and we can allow them to see the full text whenever they have access to it, and that's all great. But really the point of all of this in the end is to give people other means of access, other forms of access, which might be circulating a print copy in a library. That's also a good result for us in terms of discoverability. That's the same as another part of our business in the long term. We can offer people opt-in resources wherever they are. That's also a really important part of building this virtuous circle of opt-in resources, content linking, all leading to further discovery. But when we started thinking about how we're going to feed all of these different areas, which operate in such different ways, the only thing that really was the common factor in every little bit of it was how we organized our metadata, and was it organized in the same way right across our business? And quite clearly it wasn't. So we started a program which we've become known as the Oxford Index, which is really a program which is about metadata and descriptions of data. It had three primary objectives in the first instance. First is to create a standardized description of every item of content that we publish in one place. The vital part of that is it's every reference entry, every book chapter, every bibliography, every research review, as well as every monograph chapter and every journal article. So they're all described in the same way, consistently. And the very least that we can do with that is we can give all that stuff to Harry. And we can do it consistently, we can update it consistently, and we can make it available not only to Harry but to anyone else who wants to use it, so it's freely available. That's a very big thing in itself, actually, just to get that organized. If we're going to give it to everyone else, we decided we would create an Oxford interface. And I want to put in a disclaimer here. So we have a website that shows all this stuff, but my disclaimer is, how important is that website going to be? Well, quite possibly not very important in itself. I'm not a great believer in one publisher gateways. It's just not the way people work, or should work. It is going to be really quite important in some areas, for example in the humanities, where OEP happens to be very strong, and where this kind of gateway, this kind of connectivity is really underdeveloped at the moment. But in an STM world, it's not that important. However, it is a proof of concept. It's a proof of concept for us that we can get our data to behave in the same way, that we can apply common taxonomies, that we can apply common methods to it, and get it to work online. So it is, in that sense, a really good working model of how well we can get our metadata to behave. It makes sure there's always a landing page for Oxford content, and makes it searchable from the web, if that happens to be the way that people can search it. And we can cross-search on Oxford books and journals for the first time. The third and the most important thing for the future, and this is where it comes back to the text mining discussion this morning, is it gives us a way to create, to store and reuse and enhance links and relationships across all of the parts of our content. By having at least a token that represents everything that we publish in one place, we can create meaningful links. We can create overview pages which provide a single landing page for a topic, whether that's influenza or hyperinflation or John Milton, and we can point to all of the items of content that we publish on that topic, and therefore start to build authorities, ontologies, and the infrastructure of the semantic web. And we can embed those links directly in the products and manage them from one place. Last but not least, this is a free service. So it's both free and it's a service. It's a service, not a product. We want to make this stuff available. In the longer term, this is going to lead, in the medium term, I believe, towards open metadata, us publishing more linked data and so on. We're not there quite yet. We're still building the infrastructure. But it's important not to consider it as a product, not to think that you have a gateway through which everybody must pass. We've been there. We've seen far too many of those gateways, and they don't work like that. This is really a joke. This is simply some of the internal architecture that had to go on to get all the metadata in one place. I'm not going to go through it. It can be complicated when you have a long history of publishing in lots of different fields, lots of different content types, and so on. There's content lying around all over the place. And putting this thing together has been like going around and emptying out all the cupboards in the press. All the data cupboards in the press, and they will empty them out onto one big table and try and sort through them and make them behave the same way. You would not believe what was in some of those cupboards. So just standing back a bit, what does this mean for some things from the outside? What does it mean when we already have a really well optimized journal site that gets a huge amount of traffic from Google? Aren't we duplicating something here? Aren't we putting something up alongside it which is going to affect things, going to make this journal or that monograph less discoverable? We don't think so at all. We don't think there's going to be any change to existing SEO or rankings of the content. Google wants to get its users to the full content, and it wants to get to do that as soon as possible. However, one thing that the Oxford Index can do is to make sure that Google knows that all of this content is mapped in a consistent way from OUP. And that's not actually easy when you have some sites called amb.org, some sites called oxfordjournals.org, some sites called oed.com, some sites called something else completely. So the index provides, in its sort of data form, I mean it happens to be in the form of a website as well, but it's really the data that counts. Every link in the index resolves onto a piece of full text content in an Oxford online product. And that is understandable to a machine as much as it is to any human user of that system. As I've said, it can be seen as a highly trusted network, and we believe that that will lift the visibility of every site on which that content is published. Once again, the aim is that we increase the use, the good, meaningful use of the content. Everything else follows from that. What does it mean for library integration? Well, when libraries feel a bit bypassed if we end up putting a lot of this stuff out there for free so Google can find it, well, we've tried to develop the index in a way which binds it in as closely as possible with library services, so that you can search back into library services right there from an index page, so that we reflect libraries' credentials, their access rights, and allow people to filter according to the access rights of the institution that they have been recognized as coming from, and so on. So we don't think it's going to affect libraries, the performance of this content in libraries. If anything, it should attract more visibility to the content which the library has provided for their patrons. What about other library ANI research services? Well, again, as I have said before, the fact that we have a website is not the main point of the story. The main point of the story is we have a consistent set of metadata which we are working actively to classify, to link, to enhance in various semantic ways, and we're going to distribute that data as far and wide as possible. So it makes no difference to Harry, to EDS, makes no difference to Primo or Summon. Quick summary then of how we see it. We've built a hub of metadata which contains metadata for every item. It's going to contain all of the links that we create between items so those can be shared and reused, and we never have to work out again by a human that Picasso is related to Cubism and Cubism to Picasso. Once we've done that once in one work, we'll be able to do that across the board. We're creating our ontologies and we're storing those in our hub. The main thing is that, say, we're doing a lot more linking work. We'll be working on text mining. We'll be creating relationships between content in lots of different ways, storing all those back in the hub. We can export all that data to external search partners, whether those are the big players in library discovery, or whether in the end, ultimately, it ends up being used on a general web search engine. We're using that metadata right in our online products now, exactly the same data to generate the pictographic descriptions in the online products and the links that are coming through in our new products. We are putting it up on our own web view of the index, which enables people to land and cross-search if they wish to. And we're developing ways of connecting one product to another through exposing the index data right in a product. So there's going to be a new bar appearing from next week when we release a new version of Oxford Reference Online, our new general reference service. There'll be a bar at the bottom which allows you to bring up the content links that we can find in other Oxford products. So everything going on within Oxford Reference will remain in front of you if you want to keep that focus on reference. Everything else, journal articles, chapters, other things that are related to that topic can be shown to you from this expanding bar that will appear at the bottom of the page. So our hope obviously is that we bring in more traffic from external search, and that we circulate that traffic, that we allow people to discover the related content that we can offer. Now, it is only the content from one publisher, but we'd be failing ourselves and we'd be failing our authors if we didn't at least try to make sure that people were aware of its existence. Benefits, we've talked about traffic enough. The benefits and the lessons learned for us are about consistent methods. And this may sound like a sort of a pathological neatness coming through. It's not about neatness. This is about consistency for the users. Being able to see across all forms of Oxford publishing. Consistent cross-product navigation, knowing that you're going to be able to navigate from one thing to another. Having a reliable set of tools available to you on each of our websites is an extremely important part of the user experience and of our customer experience. And I think that is something that is hard to underestimate. Hard to overestimate. Anyway, I'm sure you know what I mean. It gives us a place in which we can pilot new methods and evolve common data fields, so that if Harry wants to come and talk to us about adjusting our metadata, we can do it in one place. The most important bit of this, from my point of view, all of the preceding stuff we've been talking about is infrastructure, building blocks, having the metadata in one place. The exciting bit for me, and the bit that is stretching ahead as far as I can see, is the way that this gives us an evolving grid to connect our content up, to evolve ontologies, to use linked data, to improve our own data, and to offer relationships that we can derive from our content into that data set as well. As I say, that's a little way off yet, because we're still trying to get our own information organized properly, but I'm hopeful that it's coming. One example of what we've had to do, again, this is part of the sort of learning curve really. We found when we looked across all our different kinds of business, because that's really what all these different publishing areas are, different kinds of business, general reference, very different kind of business, from science journal articles and our scholarly editions. We've just this week launched a huge new website of scholarly editions, all the great literary, philosophical texts that we have in great critical editions, everything from Shakespeare to John Milton's just been published this week. It's going to go on evolving. It's a massive thing for AUP and the humanities. It's about as different in terms of the kind of use, kind of business, kind of scholarly effort it represents from a science journal article as it's possible to get. Over the whole of that, if we're going to provide a mountaintop view of our content in a single place, we had to evolve a taxonomy that could genuinely cover everything. And doing that was another exercise of going around and emptying out cupboards. And we found that the way we described books at title level in the US was different from the way we described them in the UK and the rest of the world. We described that each of our websites had evolved its own taxonomy, and that none of them related to one to another. And so actually just trying to present our content as a single set was a considerable challenge. But in doing so, if we are able to present a semantically intelligent view of our content, it becomes immensely easier to connect our content to lots of other content in other systems. The index is available here. It's in a sort of public beta. It's constantly evolving. In a couple of weeks' time, we'll probably add about 1 million records to it and various other features. Very quickly, this is a mocked-up journal article from Alcohol and Alcoholism, the favorite journal of the project team. This is an example of an overview where we have a piece of we have a topic page essentially with a free piece of reference content given away. Normally it's rather longer than 2 lines, and then lists of links to related Oxford content. And coming up on the right of this page, you can begin to see the relationships, the semantic, the ontology is beginning to sort of kick in. We can relate overviews one to another. So we can say that everything about John Milton is related in some sense to everything on William Blake or Andrew Marvell or Calvinism or Ovid drama or something else. I'll leave this slide up. I'm not going to go through it in any detail, but on reflecting on what we've learned about discovery in the last few years, it's a continuous exercise. We learn something new every day, and the world changes every day. Our current thinking is represented in a few of these comments, particularly the importance of the non-Western world, as we see more and more journal articles being published from East Asia, as well as being consumed in East Asia. It's not about how it's consumed, it's about where the community is and what they're doing. Rather than go through each of those in detail, happy to finish here and ask if there are any questions.
Really interesting. I just have a quick question for Robert. As you were going through this huge project, did you find that you had the skills that you needed within the press already, or did you find that there were some real gaps you had to go out and recruit? And if so, where did you find those people?
We have recruited. Sorry, see the cogs going around. I think that I divide that into two things really. OUP's focused for quite a number of years now on XML first, so all our content is in XML. A lot of the information we needed was present in one shape or another somewhere in the data. The difficulty was pulling it out either out of the content XML or out of the ONIX metadata, for example, that exists at title level, which we pump out 24 hours a day. I mean, that's one of the odd things about it. We think discoverability is a new thing, right? But actually, we pump out title level stuff to Amazon. No one in their right mind would think of not shoving as much data towards Amazon as they possibly could. It's a metadata business. That's what it is. So in that sense, none of this is new at title level. The difficulty was doing it at item level. So actually, it was more of a sort of data job. We do have good data engineers and a strong content architecture team. That was hard work and difficult to integrate stuff, but it wasn't completely new. Where we have hired is in the area of link architecture, semantic web development, and taxonomies and so on. And we've found those people in relatively academic areas in some cases. We don't have a large team still, it's only a few people. But what we have also had for a while is a language engineering team who've been doing this sort of work in dictionary data and lexical data for a long time. So we do have a bit of a very, very important starting point there actually, because the lexical data that we've had has become a major business for us. We produce a lot of process corpus data about natural language use, which underpins a number of systems out there in the real world, like Siri and so on. So there is quite a lot of that there. But that way of thinking about the combination of structured and unstructured text, how to drive meaning out of it, how to disambiguate things, how to go through a process where you can create 300,000 overviews and not have too many that are actually duplicates or completely off topic. That's a different skill set. That's seeing data much more in a bigger form than simply the sort of publishing metadata that surrounds everything we've always published. Does that answer the question?
And there was somebody else here. Was there somebody else here after Jeff?
Hi, Robert. So Jeffrey Builder, Crossref.
Hi, Jeff.
Delighted to hear that that you too see the sort of the limits of the publisher silo. But now that you've built in-house all of these skills in building ontologies and in building, very, very sophisticated link structures, doesn't it seem to be that the logical next step would be to extend this to content beyond the stuff you publish? And are there any thoughts about that?
Yes. I mean, that's an interesting point. I mean, firstly, I'd say I'd say there are two things about this story. One is that you have to produce the metadata. That's the essential building. You're just not in the game. And that's what we realized 2.5 years ago. Without a consistent set of metadata, just weren't in any of the games that were going on at all. In terms of developing ontologies and so on, I'd still say we're in early stages of that. I mean, we've made quite a lot of strides by taking advantage of things we already have, like we have general reference content where we have lots of subject dictionaries where we go to an expert in physics or chemistry or banking or law, and we say, what are the top 5,000 terms we need to define in your subject? So actually the general reference content, which is in one sense the least complex or academic, has been a really helpful starting point for us. There's still a long way that we can go, and in a way what we're doing there is seeing how much value we can add. It is quite experimental. We don't really know exactly where that's going, and we're happy to approach it like that. We know that the better we can make the related content linking we can offer, the more it's likely to be used. So, as I say, there's not a sort of fixed agenda to the semantic aspect of the development. In terms of extending it, we don't rule out extension in a number of ways. Firstly, creating a full text archive which can extend the power of text mining and other forms of access that sort of mirrors the metadata index. And the second is, if people wanted to experiment with including other data in a similar kind of system, we'd be open to that discussion. We're not planning on it, and there's no sort of major sort of campaign plan to do that right now. We have enough to do to sort of get our own house in order, as it were. But we do publish on behalf of a number of other people as well, whether it's the British Academy, who we publish on behalf of, or we have a number of publishing distribution arrangements with other university presses. So we are working with other people's data to a certain extent already.